Hey, what's going on? Mecha here, and welcome to another Fire Emblem archetype tier list. Today we are going to tackle, as you probably already saw, the wyverns, the big flying boys and girls. There's quite a few of them, and I can tell you right now, there's not a single bad one in there. This class has always been good. Usually these people join around the middle of the game rather than early game, probably because they would destroy the early game if they let you join early. But, you know, they are always good nonetheless, despite the lack of availability sometimes. And that's usually because they have pretty good bulk, they have high HP, high strength, high defense, pretty poor resistance usually, but generally in Fire Emblem there are more physical enemies than magical enemies, so that doesn't really tend to hurt them very much. Technically, a lot of these are weak to bows, but a lot of games also feature like ways around that, such as you know, the item called the Delphi Shield or similar items where they block arrow weaknesses. The fact that archers are probably the least threatening enemy type in the game makes them like very easy to use. If there's a group of like single archer and a bunch of other enemies, you could just fly in with the wyvern. You outrange them usually because of their huge mobility. Kill the archer and then everything else is free real estate for them. So that makes it a lot easier too. And generally just that range they have is so ridiculously good. The ability to just ignore terrain, fly all the way over it, surprise enemies from the other side. Even just having more mobility than the enemy can be a huge boon. It means you can always attack first no matter what position you were in your previous turns. And having a group of Wyvern Riders to swoop down and kill an entire group of enemies is just so satisfying. There's a reason that enemy Wyvern Riders are usually the most threatening enemy type in the game too. Class is just so ridiculously good. Sometimes in paper it might look like they don't really have that many advantages because when you think about it, usually they use like one weapon type like lances. So they'll be weak to axes. They should be weak to bows, and they should be weak to magic, but in practice they just tend to work out very well. That's one of the reasons why Wyvern Rider is the most commonly recommended class for Three Houses characters. So for the units on this tier list, as you can see, I have quite a few of them, so this is going to be a pretty long video, I can already know. But I had to leave a couple people off. I had to leave off everyone who promotes into Wyvern Rider, instead of, you know, being a Pegasus Knight. So, for example, Sita and the White Wings, I didn't put them on here because I have plenty of units to judge already. And there's definitely going to be a Pegasus list at some point, so no reason to include those. I also had to leave off basically every Three Houses character, even though almost every character in Three Houses has their optimal class be a Wyvern. I can't include them all here, so I only included Three Houses characters that are canonically Wyvern Riders at some point. Claude automatically promotes into a Wyvern Master in Part 2. Cyril, the only enemy appearance he has is as a Wyvern Rider. And then finally you got Setheth, and he joins as a Wyvern Rider as well. So everyone else, I mean, people like Sylvain and Ferdinand and Gilbert and Aloy, they should probably be Wyvern Rider at some point, but they don't canonically become one when they're like enemies or they're automatically reglassed into one. So that's why I had to leave them off. Other than that, I don't think there's any surprising exclusions. So I got the OG Minerva, she's in FE1, FE3 both books. FE11, FE12, I got a couple of incarnations here, the only ones that she has sprites for on this tier list maker. We got Altena from FE4, Jean from FE5, Edda from FE5, Lady from FE6, Zeiss from FE6, Heath from FE7, Vida from FE7, we got Cormag from FE8, we got Jill from FE9, Jill from FE10, we got Haar from FE10 and FE9 as well, obviously. I got Michaelis from FE12, New Mystery. He's not in the original FE3 book 2, but he is a New Mystery. I got Church, I really don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm sorry, from Awakening. Scarlet from Fates, she's in Birthright as like a proper unit, and then Revelations for like one chapter, and that's basically it. We got Camilla from Conquest and Revelations. Baruka, same games. We got Claude from Three Houses, like I said. We got Cyril. And we got Setheth, all these from Three Houses. So that's the units we're working with today. If I forgot any, feel free to post them in the comments, but I'm pretty sure I've got them all asked. I would have included the Last Promise characters in here. I would have loved to talk about Karina and Ben, but unfortunately I think I have enough to talk about for today. So we'll just get started with the start. So Minerva, I got 3 of them in here. I know there's actually like 5 instances of her. I don't really know a whole lot about FE1 because I haven't finished it, but I do know in FE3. One big problem for wyverns that is going to be like a common trend in some games, flying mobility is better than in others, and one way that this mobility can be hampered a little bit is if the game forces you to dismount. So in FE3, that's one of those games where you have to dismount when you go indoors, and not the whole game is indoors. I would say it's about like 50-50 maybe about how many times you have to dismount, but when you're dismounted, that mobility advantage completely goes away. In fact, it swings the other way. We have to dismount in FE3. You have, from the top of my head, you have like, I think I have 6 move, and classes, for example, like the Navars that I discussed last week, they have like 7, so like the Mercenary and Hero classes. But they'll be more mobile. Marth himself also will have more move than 6. So she will actually have trouble keeping up in those maps, so the mobility advantage just kind of flips around in those maps. That kind of sucks. Also forced to use swords, not a big deal, there's no weapon triangle in that game. And in FE3, there's not a lot of different weapon levels that you have. It's not like you have like A-rank swords and C-rank lances or something like that. You just have one stat called weapon level, and Minerva's weapon level, I checked, is generally pretty good. I think her base in FE3 is like 7, and for reference, I think her base is 10, and then like the highest rank lance you ever need to use is like the Gradivus, pretty late joining, and that's 2 level ups for her, because it's base weapon level 12 that you need to use it. So generally not an issue, especially since that thing comes so late and her weapon level growth is like 70%. So generally she'll be able to use all lances she needs. In her later incarnations she uses axes, but here she just uses lances when on her dragon, and when indoor she uses swords, and okay, I guess. I'm gonna put her like around here somewhere. Not fantastic, but when you're outdoors she still gets the job done. Kills just about everything you need. FE1 and FE3 both are fairly easy games with weak enemies. She'll probably double and kill whatever you're fighting with her, but she doesn't stand out very much because almost everyone else can do that. But her class is very good in general. She's still like far above average. Like if you're a Wyvern in those games, doesn't matter that there's plenty of others. Like I would say Katria and Pala will definitely be better than her when she joins, but that still means she get a pretty good Wyvern at base. Just the ability to just attack with a Silver Lance and fly around is pretty good. Then we have the other incarnations for Minerva. We got FE11, Shadow Dragon. So in Shadow Dragon, I think Minerva has one of her best incarnations. So that's the game that invented the Hot Claire and the idea that she should use axes instead of lances. She can still use lances, but she's only like C rank, I want to say. Maybe C rank. I do know she can't use the Rider's Bane at base. I think she needs an arm scroll to use that. But she can use A rank lances. In fact, she can use any axe in the game, including her own, basically her personal weapon, the Hot Claire. Other people can use it if they reach 8 axes, but generally, she's the only one who's going to be able to use it for a while. And it's a pretty strong axe. From what I remember in Shadow Dragon, she usually doesn't double enemies, but a lot of people don't really double reliably in Shadow Dragon. Instead, generally, Shadow Dragon, you rely on forged effective weaponry to kill enemies, and she can use forged hammers for a while. That is the only effective weapon she's going to have for a while until she gets access to the Rider's Bane or the Pole Axe. Those would have been really nice to have earlier, because Minerva would really like to be able to hit Cavaliers hard. That's a very common enemy type in that game. Hitting armors is nice, but nothing else really stands out. But she can still just fly up and bonk people. And again, so can every other promoted class almost, because people can reclass the other Wyverns as well, so it makes her a bit less unique. But I still think this is one of the better incarnations of her. I think it's definitely better than the one where she's like forced to dismount, because you don't have to dismount in Shadow Dragon at all. And the same goes for New Mystery as well. The thing about New Mystery, enemy types a little bit more varied, so the effective weaponry gimmick doesn't really work very well. It wasn't like over relying on it or anything. It's not like she got the horse slaying weapons very early anyway, so it was really only just about hitting armor knights effectively. But that's kind of gone out of utility. Instead, she gets the utility of like using forged dragon pikes, which is pretty good. Like around the time she joins, you actually start to face a lot of wyverns, or rather like flying dragons, ice dragons, fire dragons. That's around the point where she joins. Pretty good at disposing of them. Just her good axe rank in general helps again. In fact, in FE3, there are very few people that have a high axe rank, which is really... It lets her use basically any axe like the Hot Claire exclusively. Means there's like no competition for those. Like the other good axe unit in that game is Chris, the Avatar, and you could choose to go another route too, so that's not even guaranteed. So I think that one is pretty good too. I think the Shadow Dragon one is a little bit better, but I think they're very close together. I think all three of these are very similar. They're probably going to stay next to each other for a while. Next we got Altena. We have actually just reached a point in FE4 in our Let's Play of FE4 with Mangs. We've actually just reached a point where we got Altena for a while, and when we first started raiding her, Mangs was like, well, she's got a holy weapon, she flies, Gable, she has really high attack, she gets insane defense, she's super tanky. I'm gonna give her, I think he gave her 4 stars because for 5 stars she would have like good availability, and she does join pretty late. And I think FE4 is when flyers are the worst by far, because I have road tiles where grounded units can take advantage of those and flyer units cannot. So they lose a lot of movement every turn from those road tiles compared to grounded units, because they can get more movement out of them. So someone like Selef with his 9 move can just move like 12 tiles on a road. But Altena will still only be able to move her, I think, like 8 or 9 move. So she falls behind, which is kind of ironic considering she's a flyer. She does get to ignore terrain, but there's not a whole lot of terrain in your way in FE4. Generally, you're just going from A to B between castles, and there's usually a road that goes between all those castles. So you almost never have to stray off of it, and as a result, you don't really get to ignore a whole lot of terrain as a flyer. You'd rather be able to use the road. It also doesn't help that Altena, as good as her stats are in a vacuum, with like the Gaybolg and her super high attack power, like I think she joins with like 50 or 60 base attack, which is insane, and she also has like 40 effective defense or something. It's insane. But it doesn't really help her very much. In FE4, enemies will actually ignore you if you have like really high defense. So that can be a bit annoying. I'm not going to count it against her because she will still be able to like kill the enemies over time. She just won't be able to enemy face them, but it's not like they're going to kill her or anything. It's just, it takes a little bit longer. But she doesn't really get to take advantage of her high defense very much. And then there's a lot of armies in FE4 after she joins where she's just not very good, where she can actually die. Like, the moment she joins is actually like a ballista castle, the full-on ballista castle. Not very good against ballista, she's weak to bows. Next few armies, they have like a lot of dark mages. Those 2-shot her, if I remember. They might be able to like get to a 3-shot eventually because of her high HP, but generally I think she's not very good against those. She actually lacks the speed to double with the Gaybolg. You would need to use like a hero sword or something. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but there was like this huge machine going down my street and I barely hear myself, so I stopped talking for a little bit. Anyway, the point is, Altena kind of needs swords to double, and you know, anyone can do that, and she's not really a good candidate to have like a super high kill hero sword or anything, because she's usually one of the last people to reach like certain important targets like bosses. Usually it's better to just have her use the Gaybolg and attack whatever you need to be dispatched. Usually something that's like out of your way that a flyer can get to. That is usually a better purpose for Altena. She doesn't really do that very well even, but she does alright at it. It's kind of funny because like she gets so much defense from the Gaybolg, but most of the enemies that she faces beyond like chapter 10 are enemy magic users. Those are the most threatening enemies, the most annoying enemies, the ones that you would like her to dispatch. Those just bypass her defense entirely. So she can't really make use of that boon very well, and instead she's just relying on her high HP to survive. Not very good at that. I still think she belongs like around C tier because most casual players, and even most players in general, will be able to make good use of her. But she's not particularly excellent at what she should be doing, which is killing everything in sight. That's what a Wyvern Lord does the best, is fly somewhere, kill almost everything in sight, and preferably without a scratch. And Altena, probably one of the worst of these in this whole tier list. And I know this looks weird. I know holy weapons in FE4 look ridiculous, but this is what Altena tends to turn out for me in practice, what she does in practice. She's not bad, but doesn't stand out as much, nearly as much as any of these others. Next up, we have two characters from my favorite game, Thracia. We got Dean and we got Edda. Dean is a pre-promote that joins in chapter 14 as a, a dragon rider, dragon knight, whatever they're called in that game. I just know they're promoted and have a dragon, so that's all that counts. Dean is very good. Dean is very, very powerful. He's not hard though. He's not invincible, but he's pretty damn strong. You just need to be a little bit careful with him because his stats don't let him take 0 damage from enemies, but he can kill almost anything, even with his base weaponry. It's a pursuit critical of, I believe, around 3, and he joins with like a killer lance where you can trade him a killer lance pretty quickly. I think Edda joins with one, in fact. You can trade him that. Pretty good with it. Basically has like 90% crit with it from the start. Every time he doubles, he just has 90% crit on the second hit, and that's good enough for me. He does have a personal weapon called the Dragon Lance. It's kind of tough to attain. What you need him to do is you need him to visit a house that's in range of like a bunch of dangerous enemies for him. There's a boss with a tornado tome that's effective against him. There is a couple ballistas that are kind of in his way there. If you do visit a house, he gets the Dragon Lance, and that is a pretty damn strong weapon. It's a little inaccurate, but it does have a brave effect, and I believe it gives him both Vantage and Wrath, so he's pretty much going to kill everything. Let me look that up real quick. No, it just gives him Vantage, and the reason I had to look that up is because I almost never get it. I think it's a little overkill for him. I think he doesn't really rely on it at all. It's not like Shannon and the Balmung, for instance. He's pretty good without it. He can just use a killer lance. You can even one round with an iron lance a lot of the time because his stats are just good enough for that. He's pretty good stats, and you do have scrolls available to make him better if you so desire so, but he really doesn't need it. He's pretty fine nonetheless. I don't think he's quite, I don't think he's quite S tier, but I think he's quite good nonetheless. You just need to be a little bit more careful with him than, I don't know, than Haar, for example. He's not invincible like that. But he's pretty strong. It's pretty nice. I like him a lot. One great thing about Dean that I should mention before I move on to Edda, it also applies to her, is a lot of these Draco Knights are hurt when they have to dismount, which it doesn't go for a lot of them, but it does go for FE5 characters because FE4 does have forced dismounting. But Dean isn't hurt by it very much because not only does he have A rank in lances for outdoors, but when he's forced to dismount, go indoors and use swords, he also has an A rank in swords there. Big distinction, not a lot of mounted units in that game have it, and it's really nice that Dean can just use good swords, like the Sleep Sword, for example. He's very good with that in the Xavier chapter. Makes it a lot easier to recruit Xavier. You can use Killing Edges to get high critical rate. You can use a Wind Sword or a Fire Sword or a Thunder Sword if you want one to range. You can use any strong sword you want to do. You can use a Silver Sword if you wanted to. You can use the King Sword to just quadruple things to death and give charm to other people. So he's a lot of versatility both indoors and outdoors. And you'll see with, for example, Edda, that not every mounted unit in FE5 has that kind of versatility. And these stats are pretty good too. He also gets a support bonus from both Edda and Lenoan, if I remember correctly. In fact, Lenoan gives him one of the few supports that like plus 20. In Thracia, most supports is give plus 10 hit, avoid, crit, and crit avoid. And that's pretty good. That's pretty nice. He just gives it to you for free, no support levels or anything. And that makes him even better at combat. It gives him even higher critical than he already had. In case you think like 90 crit isn't good enough, you can just give him even more. No, come to think of it, he doesn't even need to get 90 crit because he also has a skill, and that also factors into crit. So basically, you can crit anything you want him to as long as you have a killer weapon, and those are fairly widely available. They're enough to where you have them for every round of combat. You need one. Now, Edda, she's different. Edda is a lot worse than Dean. Not unusual. But it's kind of like a Pegasus Knight that joins a little later. Slightly bulkier stats, but not super great. I think Edda is mostly useful for flyer utility, not so much for combat. I think optimal use of Edda, if you want your units the best they can possibly be, while putting the least amount of work on them, then Edda is good as just a unit that can fly people around. Like, for example, a couple chapters after she joins, she's actually very good just for flying people around. Chapter 14X, you need civilians to be rescued and escaped to the north in that Fog of War chapter between two mountains. She's perfect for that. Someone gets captured and the enemy flies on top of a mountain, she can get him back. Because the captured enemy will have low enough stats where she can kill him, because you know that enemy just has that chapter just has enemy Pegasus Knights that will get weighed down a lot by whoever they're capturing, get weighed down there by the weapons, and I can kill those, that's fine. Chapter 15, all you need to do is fly across a mountain right north of your starting point. And then you're at the end. So she's perfect for getting, say, Leaf across, or Laura, or someone else. Pretty good for that. Next couple chapters all involve pretty long distance flying if you need them to be. And if someone needs to cross a long distance, Edda can help them do the job. So she's pretty good for that. But her combat isn't that good. She has fairly poor base stats. Usually people like the train growth units in chapter 14 where she joins the defense chapter. I think it's called the Onslaught. And I just remembered why. And Edda's not that good at fighting there because most of the enemies are armor knights and she has trouble dealing with enough damage to those. She doesn't really have that high of a strength base. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. I just know she doesn't really do significant damage. Accuracy could be a lot better. She's not even reliably doubling if she weighs herself down because her build isn't as good. So she has a lot more trouble than like Dean. Dean can fight in that chapter pretty well as long as he's out of ballista range. So yeah, Edda has like most of the weaknesses that Dean and all these Draken Riders have, but few of the advantages because her combat is just a lot worse. I don't think she's D tier, I just think she's like the worst at fighting here so far, but I still think her utility outdoors in the next few chapters, like in 14X, 15, 16, 17, no matter what route you go, she's all pretty good there. She can even contribute beyond that, but the problem is when she has to go indoors, which is basically what happens after those chapters I just named, not as good anymore. In fact, she's pretty bad there because you can only use lances, and I think she has E-rank swords, and that's pretty garbage. And her stats, as I said, aren't already there. They already aren't that good. So she's in trouble. She's in trouble in those chapters. She's not that good. But if you raise her, if you're willing to give her scrolls, you can still become good if you wanted to. But she's definitely... Most of these people, they're pretty self-sufficient, but Edda is definitely one of the least self-sufficient of these all. Next we have Milady. Milady, I've often said it, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. Milady is probably the best unit in FE6. If not, like, she's not the best, and at least she's like top 3, right? The only people I think that can compete with her are Rutger and Marcus. Percival, maybe arguably, but I think Milady is the better one between those two for sure. So I'm going to put her straight up in S tier. FE6 is a pretty well-balanced game. People give it a lot of crap for having a lot of useless units, but at least the top tier is very competitive. At least in the top tier, you can tell they kind of put some thought into balancing it, because Milady she doesn't join early, but she does have flight and you know, a mount and some pretty goddamn good combat stats to boot. She has, like, even without the hardware bonuses, before the hardware bonuses, her strength and speed and defense are all just so good. Just the base, her growth for those are also decent, but her bases alone are pretty good. She joins at a level where she could just be promoted and she'll be decent, but she can also just level up a couple times before she promotes. Either way, she's gonna be bonkers at combat. Every time I play FE6, I'm surprised at how good a combat Milady is. The thresholds for that game for both doubling and one rounding with like having enough attack to like 2 KO enemies are pretty high. The enemies in that game are super bulky and generally pretty hard to kill. But Milady easily tends to hit them with just an iron weapon. She's that good. And if not, the chapter where she joins, you can buy killer lances for pretty much... Well, I mean, you can't buy them for half gold because you don't have the silver card yet. But if you're just... You should probably buy like 8 killer lances in that shop alone. Just so Milady and all the other lance using people you have can just two-hit kill people with killer weapons. Because that just makes them so much more reliable. The killer lance is accurate, has a chance to crit, which can help in case you miss. If you weren't able to 2-hit kill before, you have a chance to crit and make up for it. It's super good, and it makes all lance using units really good from that point on. And Milady can really profit from that. She's a great candidate for the boots. I mean, all these guys are, well, not these guys particularly, but generally flyers are a good candidate for boots because they could just fly further and get even more kills. It's just nice to have extra range. A lot of people give boots to people who have like very little mobility. A lot of people like to give them to their armor knights, make their movement roughly equal. But what I like to do with my boots is give myself extra options. Because I believe, when you think about it, if you give your lowest movement units an extra bit of movement, get them closer to the enemy, well, you haven't really given yourself any extra options. You've just given them same as anyone else. But if I give it to a unit that has more range than before, if that unit has like more range than anyone else, I can reach points I can no longer reach before within a shorter amount of time. I can reach enemies that are, say, 12 squares away from their starting point instead of just 10 squares away. So I get like a lot more versatility out of my army if I give boots to someone like Milady. So that's one reason I like to give the boots to Milady. But even without the boots, she's still a fantastic unit. Absolutely easy to top tier. I don't think anyone will contest it. Now next is her little brother Zeiss. By the way, I just want to note that like I feel like all these wyverns have like something very distinct about them. You can tell like, hey, they're wyvern riders. Usually it must be like how a lot of them are like redheads, and then a lot of them just have that like the very distinct looking armor or just kind of a way of carrying themselves. I think especially like a lot of them are like based on Minerva. I feel like Milady definitely is. Edda, Altena definitely are. Jill definitely takes after them. Something about them just makes them very similar to me and very likable too. I gotta say I like that design a lot. Anyway. This is also a redhead, but he's not as good as any of these other redheads. I mean, maybe a couple of them, but I think the problem with Zeiss is he joins kind of under-leveled, and his biggest problem I feel like are accuracy and his low speed. Those are his biggest issues in FE6 in vanilla. He became a big meme in an FE6 playthrough I did, but I did FE6 reverse recruitment, where units join in reverse order. So anyone who joins first, normally like Roy, would join at the end, like last, and someone who joins very late, like Corel, would join first. And in that game, in that version, Zeiss joined very early, and we definitely complained about his accuracy a lot, and I kept using him to annoy Mangs, who was co-hosting with me, and he kept missing, and it became a big meme because he's missing. It was just funny. He missed at the most iconic moments. Normally in vanilla, he has the same problem, kind of. If you give him the killer lance, it actually won't be that bad, because the killer lance is so accurate. Horse Slayer also works pretty well on him to fix that. Of course, the problem of not doubling is still there. And at that point in the game, you do kind of want to be able to double reliably. It's kind of the point in the game, like chapter 16 where he joins. It's kind of the point where you want most of your units to be able to double, and they probably will be able to double. So him not being able to do that, it stands out in a negative way. And I'm not a big fan of that. He does have pretty good HP. He has really high strength. A lot of people know that he joins with pretty high strength normally in normal mode. And his harbor bonus can actually send his strength to like 19 or 20 at the low level of 7, which is pretty insane. But I think a lot of people like kind of they focus too much on that stat alone. It's like, wow, harbor bonus is good, but they forget that he has other big issues. Not a big issue actually. He has actually that you know, that doesn't help here, is that he has D lances at base, so you can't actually use the kill lance unless you promote him. And you can't promote him until you give him 3 levels. So at the very least, you have to suffer through 3 levels. And then I think a lot of people will be like unwilling to promote Zeiss after 3 levels because, you know, if you're using a unit like that, you probably enjoy training them and getting the most out of them. A lot of people won't even want to promote him at level 10, even though I think theoretically if you want to get the most out of Zeiss, that's the optimal way to use him. But if you want to make a Zeiss as strong as possible late game, which is what I know a lot of people want, then they'll probably train to at least like 15 or 20. And I really would recommend you don't wait until 20 to promote him, because that extra lance rank, that really helps him. And he can only get it if you promote. I mean, you can train him to like get 50 attacks in or like 25 kills, and he'll make it C as well, but that takes quite a while. Generally, I think Zeiss is slightly worth trouble if you want, but he's not the easiest unit to use. But he can be good. It's not that hard to train him up. It just takes a little bit of patience. You gotta have a contingency plan in case he misses, because he misses a lot before he can use killer lances. So I would say he's better than these two actually. I don't know about Altena. Altena is like, she has like a pretty low ceiling for how good she can be. She just joins and she's basically that good. Like she can promote almost instantly, get pursuit, and that's nice. But she's never going to be a really good unit. I think Zeiss eventually turns into something worth raising. It's just when he joins, he's definitely worse relatively than Altena. But once Zeiss gets up to par, which can be within a couple chapters if you put the time into him, then he actually becomes like pretty good. Not Milady, but still pretty strong. Like part of the appeal why Milady is so much higher is because even without any work put into her, she's really good. And she takes care of herself. Zeiss definitely needs handholding, needs babying, and you need to account for the times when he misses. That's a big issue with him. Now, next in here we have Heath from Fire Emblem 7, joins around the middle of the game as usual. Zeiss is kind of, I feel like Heath is like a better version of Zeiss almost. He's in a game where, first of all, accuracy is a lot better. Lances in FE6 have a notoriously bad hit compared to in FE7. There's a pretty big gap between, for example, the hit rates of the steel lance. Like 15 hit, it's pretty big, but even with the iron lance you can tell. That makes Heath a lot more reliable to raise. You can generally rely on Heath hitting his target, unless he has like weapon triangle disadvantage or he's hitting someone on a forest. He also joins on a leveled, also joins at level 7 in fact, I'm pretty sure. He also gets Harpoon bonuses, but they're less pronounced than FE7. All Harpoon bonuses are only 5 levels, whereas I think Zeiss gets 8 or so. Pretty big amount, pretty big difference. Heath is pretty good in Hector Harp mode. I like him a lot. He is theoretically kind of has that problem I talked about before, where he's bad against axe users, bad against magic, and bad against bows, but because he's so flexible and because the Wyvern just has so much movement, not very difficult to get him to get kills. And Heath, I found snowballs very fast. He's a good candidate for the AFAS drops because he joins pretty much right before you get it, and he's still pretty on the level when you do get it probably. So he gets a lot of levels to gain, and if you're not training Nino, and a lot of people aren't training Nino because he's not very good, then he's probably going to get the most out of it out of any of your units. Like maybe Wrath competes with him over that, and that's really about it. No one else gets as many levels out of the AFAS drops. Doesn't boost him a whole lot, but I think it's fun to mention. Because generally Heath, once he gets going, he's just like these. He's just a tanky flyer, kills everything in 2 hits, has enough speed to double. I found the Axe Reaver pretty useful on Heath when training him. He can kill the bosses in the desert if you're not afraid to take a bit of a risk. Without that, he's going to get his butt kicked in there, but with the Axe Reaver, you can get the boss kills fairly reliably. The Axe Reaver gives you double weapon triangle advantage if you have it, so that can make him a lot more accurate. He can kill pirates in 4-fanged offense. The Linus version has a lot of pirates that he can kill. But even with just an Iron Lances against, say, Cavaliers in Chapter 25, the Crazed Beast, can do pretty well. And FE7 is also a game where flyer utility in general is pretty good. You got all the rescue drop tricks that you can use. A lot of these can use rescue drop tricks, by the way. That's one of the reasons I don't like Altena as much. She cannot rescue drop anyone. But Dean and Edda and Beast and Milady, they can all do rescue drops, and Heath can do the same. And I like that a lot. So I would say Heath, I've actually found him pretty good. Whether you find he's better than Minerva depends like how much you mind training up a unit, because at base Heath is definitely not good. He's serviceable. I think he's better than Zeiss at base. But Minerva comes and she's usable out of the box. Not excellent. Heath will surpass her in relative terms. It just depends on like how much you hate training him. But I think Heath is easy enough to train. Like I don't have to go out of my way as much to train him that I can put him like around here. I don't think he's quite A tier. I do think he feels like an A to S rank tier once he's been trained up, but until he gets there, it's not very good. Okay, next up is Vida, also from FE7, and Vida, stats-wise, she is really powerful, like really, really good. Good HP, good strength, good speed. I mean, good defense. Her speed is okay, but it's not good enough to be like a speed demon, but it's enough for FE7, where the enemies are really slow. This is one of the reasons why I think Heath, even though his speed is pretty average overall, it's not great, but it's enough to double after a couple levels. Base isn't too good, but his growth is good enough, his promo bonus is enough to where at some point he just starts doubling and he doesn't stop. And Vida has roughly the same speed on average, I think. She just has stats like basically what Heath ends up with, I think a little more tankiness. The weakness of Vida is there's very low availability. She's not around very much. She joins at the end of Cormag Destiny. Not quite the end, but late enough to where she doesn't really do much. And even if she's good in Cormag Destiny, you just don't really want to fight with her very much because she's not very good against, say, Valkyries or Luna Druids or anything. So generally, I just end up counting her availability as after that chapter, and there's not many chapters where you can use her. She's very good in Victory or Death, which is one chapter, admittedly, but it's one chapter where she's very good because it's a really huge map where mobility is really appreciated, lots of terrain, lots of mountains to fly over, lots of wyverns to fight. She's pretty good against those, again, because her bulk is so good. But she can fight almost anything that's like physical. She's not good against magical enemies generally. Good candidate for the Delphi shield for at least Sense of Time, because there's a lot of snipers there, and her high defense makes him good against them as long as she can take the hit. Even without the Delphi shield, she's sometimes like decent against archers, because funnily in FE7, weapon effectiveness is only 2 times rather than 3 times like it is in FE6 and FE8. So if you're gonna fight an archer with a flyer, Vida is a pretty good candidate, because generally iron bow archers, for example, they can't really do much to her, despite the weakness, which is quite impressive when you think about it. But Vida doesn't really have a lot of chapters to impress. When she's around, I think she's good, and I think that's better than a Wyvern you gotta put a lot of work into, like Edda, to make her like good. And I mean, Edda herself is only good for like a couple of chapters, not that many, so she's alright. You could argue she's better than Zeiss in that aspect too, but I think Zeiss is a little better overall when trained. Zeiss is not forced to dismount like Edda is, so I think he's a vast bit better than Edda, and I think he's also a little better than Vida overall, maybe. He does have some low bottoms, but I think, yeah, it depends on how much you value not having to train him, basically. So I think this could go either way. Maybe, actually, come to think of it, I do think Vida looks a lot more impressive than Altena, because when you think about it, they're both low availability wyverns. So maybe what it should be like is more like this. I think that looks a little bit better. Yeah, I do think Altena's worse than Vida for sure. Yeah, I think we're gonna go with this for now. Cormag, I think, is very good. I'm gonna put him like around here somewhere. Cormag is just like already when he comes, he's already pretty good, right? He's not super amazing, but he's enough speed to like where he's like close to doubling slow enemies. He's doubling slow enemies, and he's like close to doubling the good ones, like the average ones. Only Wyvern you get in FE8, but a pretty good one overall. Sea Lance is a base on, like, for example, Zeiss. Joins a bit earlier relatively. And he just has good strength and good defense, like good HP, good everything you want a Wyvern to have. And I mean, the strength of a Wyvern are just the strength of a good unit in general. Good bulk, good strength, and enough speed to double. Cormag definitely reaches all of that. The low res does hurt quite a bit in FE8. There's a lot of magical enemies like eyeballs and a lot of mages and stuff. FE8 enemy versatility is pretty high. It's not like FE7 where almost every enemy uses a lance, it feels like. There's definitely a lot more versatility, but Cormag statistically is just very solid. I used him in my recent Iron Man. Didn't even promote him early, but he just got very bad level ups overall. His HP, strength, like almost every level up was just HP, I feel like. He got quite a bit of strength, but not a lot of speed. And even I only gave him 1 speed wing, like near the end of the game, and I still felt like throughout the game, Cormag was one of my better units. So I think if he's that good in a Gross playthrough, in an Iron Man playthrough, you know, that just says a lot about how solid he is at base. I really like Cormag as a unit overall. I will say that was an Ephraim route Iron Man though, so if we take into account Erica routes, he's actually a bit worse than that. Still solid, it's like still but much better availability than, for example, Vida and Altena still, because he joins in chapter 13 instead of chapter 10, so he misses out on like 3 chapters, maybe closer to 4 because he joins so late in chapter 13. You actually have to wait for him. I think a lot of players in FE8 have actually missed Cormag and Erica route because they just kill the boss and end the chapter he joins in before he can even show up. But when you do get him, he's still pretty good. Chapter 14 and especially chapter 15, the desert chapter, he's really solid. And generally, just best chapters for flyers are the late game chapters in FE8, and Cormag is still around for all those, and he's pretty good there. The low res can again hurt in FE8. There's a lot of like shadow shot Gorgons, for example, is pretty bad against those. Gorgons in general just pretty annoying for him. Those eyeballs with shadow shot, Reeve is pretty good against him. He has kind of low luck. He's at the risk of getting crit. That's like an issue for most of these units actually. Their luck isn't usually very good. But late game you have like the option of a Hopland Guard. That's a really big issue. High crit is a problem for like enemy sword passes for a lot of units, but these generally have the defense to shrug them off. So it depends kind of on the context of whether it's a use or not. But like, for example, a Thunder Mage with a bit of crit that can really put a dent in a Wyvern Rider. That can kill him, in fact. That can really kill him. Then we have the Jills from FE9 and FE10. FE9 Jill joins around the middle of the game. I feel like a broken record at this point. But she joined it like in time. I think it's like one of the boat maps. I think FE9 has like 3 boat maps or something, or like at least 2. Feels like it has a lot. And she starts off okay, like not able to double, not even like able to like KO enemies, I think. Uses lances in the game, and I think she needs some help to get going. I think she's definitely a good candidate for bonus XP, but she just needs it. But in FE9, unless you're playing like Maniac mode, you're not really like starving for bonus XP. You have enough to make her good if you want her to be. And FE9, the enemies are very easy, so can get by without Jill, sure, pretty easily. In fact, it won't make a bunch of difference, but being a flyer in that game is just so good. That game has the version of Kanto that FE4 has, where you can just attack and then move onwards, whereas a lot of games, Kanto is just like, you can move again after using other actions like rescuing, dropping, trading, but not attacking and healing and stuff. But Jill can move after attacking, which is really nice. Don't get me wrong, Altena and Dean can do it too, I just didn't mention it for them. It wouldn't really change their ranking anything, it's just something I just realized I need to talk about. But it really helps Jill when FE9 makes her more flexible. If you can give her some bonus XP, I think it just kind of pops off and wrecks everything. I think that need for bonus XP does make her a little bit worse than these people who are just good at base. Dean needs no investment and Cormag needs like a tiny little bit, but he can like kind of fend for himself. I think for Jill that is a little less true, but she can still hold her own. I think even if you were to use like no big speed through a playthrough, she would still be decent, but not as good as these other guys. I think she's alright. I will admit I have a little bit, I like not that much XP with FE9. I actually deleted the game because it was taking up a lot of hard drive space, and it's not like, I don't have a GameCube or anything. It's a very expensive, hard game to get, and it's not really a game I want to replay a whole lot of. Not because it's bad, because it takes forever to play and it's not very difficult. And then like the Japanese version, you have like Maniac mode. It's still not very difficult, but it's just very, very tedious. I'm not a big fan of it. Not a very big fan of it at all. She's good in those games, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I don't really have too much experience, but I know she's really good in that game. I think one thing she has over Marcia in that game, as far as like speedruns are concerned, she has a higher strength cap, so she can 2-hit KO more easily with like a javelin, for example. I know that's like important against some enemies. The fact that you can forge javelins in that game is pretty good for offense as well. In general, I don't really talk about it very much, but the ability to have 1-2 range with javelins or even hand axes, super good. And wyverns almost always have access to at least javelins. Some games it matters more than others. But for example, Milady, you know you're a good unit in FE6 when you can use javelins and actually do something with them. Because in that game, javelins are pretty trash, but she can still make them work. She's that good. FE10 Jill, now she uses axes all the time, like our unpromoted class. She joins with the Dawn Brigade. Dawn Brigade is actually starving for a good unit, and actually pretty rare to be a good growth unit in a Dawn Brigade. I think the best units in that part of the game are mostly people who don't need growths. Like, I'd rather just bump the whole map with like Taronio, Warren, Nyla, Black Knights, that kind of people. Sold early on. For Jill, I gladly make an exception because she's actually worth it in the long term. People like Nolan and Zyhark, they can level up a bit and become like reasonable, but they're never very like super overpowered. They can be good in part 4, especially in lower difficulties, but they don't just solo whole maps without a bit of help. And even if you do, it feels very slow. But Jill, she just zips across the map because the flyer, she has a lot of mobility. So if you can make Jill work, you get much more rewards out of it than Nolan and Zyhark, in my opinion. That makes her really good. But raising her is a bit of a pain in the butt. In normal mode, I think it's actually very easy. I think it's one of the easiest units that gets rolling in normal mode. It is important that you give her a Forged Iron Axe, add a lot of hit onto it, as much as you can. A lot of might as well. Just make her as strong as she can possibly be. Make her good against those Pegasus Knights in the chapter after she joins. Give her some bonus experience for a couple level ups. You don't really get much in hard mode, but she's the best target for it. I even like to give her stat boosters, but that makes me a bit biased. I don't want to just judge units based on like how much favoritism I give him. It's just, whenever I play Radiant Dawn, I can just think of no better targets for these than Jill. Jill just gets the most out of these, and I think units should get rewarded for being the best user of resources because these resources are around. But I will admit, it's not fair to be like, okay, let's compare Jill with resources to other units without resources. That's an unfair thing. But if you give Jill resources, compare it to Nolan with resources, Jill ends up a lot better. And the gap between them both with resources, I think, is bigger than if I were to give neither Jill nor Nolan resources. So that's how I'm considering it, basically. So I'm not saying always give Jill resources and then compare it to your units without giving them those, but I am saying she's the best user of those, and she deserves a bit of credit for that. I am a little disappointed with Jill's hard mode performance sometimes. She is a little fragile sometimes, depends on her level ups a little bit. High or low can depend on luck, you know. But she's pretty good. She's pretty good. Around an FE9 level, maybe, I'm not sure. I wouldn't put her like below here. I think she's decent, but the level of care she takes can be a bit annoying, but the rewards are great. Like in part 3, she's easily the best unit in Dawn Brigade, even if she's like a little more fragile than some of your other units. She's just that strong, and like the flight is just so nice in part 3. 3-6, fly over the swamp, fly over the forests, and get there before other units do. Even if you have to run back a little bit and heal Kanto out of range, you're still far ahead of other units before anyone can get there. So she's a great candidate for Paragon or Beast Foe, whatever you want to give her to get her more level ups. 312, first unit down the cliffs, kill a bunch of enemies. All the human enemies are just super easy to kill for her because they're kind of, you know, they're a lot more wimpy than the Laguz enemies. And 313 once again. You can fly up and down ledges, go up and down Letke, kill everything below, fly back up if you need to, block a ledge, face one enemy at a time because they all have one range. She's really flexible and that really, really helps. So here I think it's okay for her. Could even do this, like she stands out more, but she also needs a bit more care in Radiant Dawn to be good. So it's like a matter of like how much do we want to invest in her. Kind of a coincidence they end up here because they're like very different units within the different games. I think it could go either way. I'll keep it like this one. Haar and FE9. Again, FE9 not the game I'm most familiar with. I think Haar's alright in FE9. I looked up his speed as like base 17, and I looked up some enemy stats. Looks like it doubles like a good amount of enemies, but not all of them. And in FE9 the enemies are pretty weak, so you kind of want someone who doubles all of them. At this point I feel like chapter 23 or something where he joins very late. It's like Vita level availability, if not worse. And at this point you really expect your units to double. Even if the average speed of like your paladins of like Oscar, Kieran, Titania isn't high enough to double, you have to take into account that you can use the Night Ward to level up whenever they're like getting bonus experience or whatever. They're a bit faster than you're used to, so that's the kind of unit that Haar is competing with. And those units are generally like, going to be a lot faster and going to be able to like one round everything they meet. So Haar has got some competition. The game doesn't really have a big niche for a big tanky flyer unit because almost everyone is tanky and almost everyone can run ahead. Like there's like a lot of other good high movement units that he doesn't really stand out very much. And I think his offense leaves something to be desired sometimes. The lack of doubling kind of sucks, and the Brave Axe can only be used so many times to compensate for it. Plus you might have other units that want the Brave Axe, but he's probably the best user of it. So I think Haar's alright. I'm gonna put him like around here somewhere. I like Vita better personally. I think Vita's got some more uses than Haar does, but I might be wrong. It might be more appropriate to have him like a little more higher up. Maybe like this or something, because he does need no investment at all. But he does feel like not as good as Minerva. Minerva joins a lot early relatively to him. I don't think he's that good. Radiant Dawn Haar, oh, he's going straight up here. You already know he's going straight up here. He's so good. I could even do this, depending on what you want. But I think Milady stands out a bit more. Radiant Dawn Haar, one of the few units who has 2 parts to his name rather than 1, even though part 2 is the shortest part. But he joins in part 2, he's run for 2 chapters, and in both of those he's the best unit you have by far. And he rejoins very early in part 3, not right away with the Grow Mercenaries, but like basically right after. And he just dominates the game from start to finish. His only weak points offensively is his speed. He can have some doubling issues. But in Radiant Dawn, it's pretty easy to fix your speed if you wanted to. There's a couple speed wings you can use. You get one from the Dawn Brigade that you can transport over to him if you want. There's one in part 2 that you can use on him if you want. And if he caps a couple stats, like his HP and strength, they tend to cap, I think. Skill as well, maybe even res. It's been a long time since I played Radiant Dawn, but I know Haar caps a couple stats. And if he does, you can raise his speed through the bonus experience, because you always get 3 stats. So capping a couple stats can make it easier to raise his speed up and get him there. He can also promote, get another +2 points of speed. And if you can make Haar double, he kills everything. Even if he doesn't double, he's still really good compared to everyone else, just because the extra mobility of flying is just so nice for him. So, like, for example, compare Haar to the next best combat unit is probably like Ike or something. Ike doubles and probably 1 rounds whatever he faces. He has like better speed than Haar by quite a bit. Not as much as you might think, but quite a bit. But Haar over time gets to enemies so much faster that he still usually gets the job done sooner than Ike does. And also Haar is better 1 to range because hand axes are stronger than wind edges. At least until Ike gets the Ragnell. And by the time that happens, Haar can also use forged hand axes, and you can infinitely forge in Radiant Dawn. You have no limit whatsoever in the English version. So Haar has access to really good 1 to range for the entire game. Also in Radiant Dawn, I forgot to mention this about both Jill and Haar. Wyverns aren't weak to arrows, they're weak to thunder magic instead, which is a much lower threat. So that also really helps. For some reason, Pegasus Knights are still weak to arrows, but Wyvern Riders are like, whatever, dude, we're just going to be weak to thunder magic. And thunder magic kind of sucks in Radiant Dawn. That's less accurate. It has a bit of crit. That's actually the biggest issue for Haar, I feel like, is that his luck is still kind of low, and a thunder mage can crit him, and that could kill him, depends on the amount of damage. If you play Haar, like a lot of people do, you just put him in range of a bunch of enemies. He'll take some damage to the point where a thunder mage crit can usually finish him off. But if you're a little bit careful, or you can like nullify or fortune or whatever you want to give to him, he's going to be fine. He's also a really good candidate for celerity, basically a transferable boots through the skill system. really good with that. He's good with pass as well. Just makes really good user skills in general. We can even use resolve if you want to feeling a little bit risky. Getting low on HP and he just starts doubling stuff. It's a magnificent unit. Wouldn't change anything. Super bulky, super strong. Just a little bit of speed issues, bit of res issues, but all these have that. And Haar can work around it pretty fine. Like again, you can work around the resistance even with the ward staff, pure water, all those widely available. I'm actually not sure about the ward staff, but the pure waters are very viable. So yeah, Haar good, Haar amazing. But the reason I think Milady is better is because Haar's competition. The other units around him are not as good as he is, but they come closer than I feel like Milady's peers do. Like Milady's next best unit when she joins is generally Percival, or maybe Rutger if you count him. And that's basically it. Everyone else is like many steps behind. Whereas Haar, he's competing with like Ike, for example. Mia can match his offense. You got Janaf and Ulki. And like all these have the drawbacks, sure. But I think they're closer to Haar than the other peers are to Milady. And that's why I think Haar stands out a bit more. Or that's why I think Milady stands out a bit more. Next, I got Minerva over here from FE12. I already discussed FE12, but I felt like it was more natural to just let the order of the game flow like this. Keep all Minervas together, but separate Minerva for a little bit. The Minerva is only available in New Mystery. You get him by visiting the village that he's in with Minerva first. Like you put her on top of the village and then he joins. And then after that, you gotta visit with Marth to just get the Starlight like naturally. So that's a kind of a weird recruitment. I'm not a big fan of that they did it. First of all, I think Minerva's work better if he was dead like he's supposed to be. But I mean, he's back for FE12 and so be it, you know. I just think his redemption works better when he, you know, fought Garnath to the death and actually dies to his... yeah, spoilers. So, Minerva's has the highest base stats out of like anyone in New Mystery as far as I can tell, at least when it comes to like strength and speed and defense. And HP especially. I remember his luck being kind of low though, to the point where some enemies can have crit on him and that can be a little bit nasty. But still, the fact that he has high ranks, like I'm pretty sure he has A rank, at least lances and probably axes. Let me just check that real quick. Okay, B rank axes, B rank lances, pretty much all he needs for the rest of the game. And he's not great against mages and not spectacular against dragons. He can use the dragon pikes that you probably forged at this point to pretty good effect, and that's probably enough for him to be viable. I just remember, like, that's not the only time I used Minerva. I'm actually not at the point where I'm using him right now in my New Mystery playthrough. I'm like right before that. I'm at like 20x and he joins in 21, so I'm kind of short on it. I'm gonna be there soon. So I remember him being okay, but not spectacular. Joins pretty late. I'd say he's on like Vida level or 10 level maybe. He's like good when he joins, but I don't think he's like good enough. Like he's not like Haar level. He doesn't stand out that much because that game, the properties of a Dragon Knight like his aren't very standout because almost everyone can become one, and almost everyone, there's like 5,000 units that join with B lances. So the only niche he really has is his high axe rank, which I did praise Minerva for, but to recruit him you need Minerva, so Minerva's guaranteed to be alive by the time you get him, and yeah, I don't think it really stands out very much overall. But one more thing I need to mention about Minerva, she's needed for the true ending, but I'm not really going to give that point. I'm not really going to assign points for that, because I don't think it makes a big difference in her ranking. Even if she's at base level, you can still field her in the final chapter, and she'd still be, you know, serviceable if you need her to be, but you don't need her to fight at all in order to get her to, or in order for her to recruit whoever she needs to recruit. So I'm not counting that in her favor, just thought I'd mention that real quick. But yeah, I think this is an okay tier for Minerva. I do think he's good when he joins, it's just he joins so late. I can't really give him any points. Like all these units are so good when they're around, especially like around here. They're so good when they're around. They rack up so many, as I like to call it, brownie points. And I can't really say a unit that joins like the last 5 chapters or less is as good as they are. His stats are good though, but his res is really low. Like really low. Okay, Shursh, whatever you pronounce it as. I did use her on my first playthrough in Awakening, but that was like one of my 2 playthroughs in Awakening. So I'm not the most experienced at using her. Like this whole part is not me being very experienced at the games. I'm back at full experience with 3 houses. So I do like her as a unit. I do think she's good. It's not exactly a game where everyone can become a flyer unless you do some, like maybe the kids, I guess. But generally, I think it's a pretty nice exclusive thing to have. Although you can become like a dark flyer and for like a lot of units and get like guild force and shit. But I think she's generally pretty good. I remember her being able to use the hammer is pretty nice in her joining chapter, kill the armor knights. She could use whatever it's called, a beast killer. to kill enemies that are on Pegasus Knights or Cavaliers, Paladins, that kind of stuff. That's pretty good. I kind of like that. I think she's okay. I turned her into a Griffin Rider. I'm not sure if it was the best choice for her or not. I've heard conflicting opinions on the internet. Generally, most people seem to put her around the B tier, so that's where I'm going to put her. Put my faith in other people for a change. I would say she's probably better than this version of Minerva, the one that has the dismount in FE3. But I don't know if she's as good as these Juggernauts right here. These are pretty good, I think. The Minervas and Shadow Dragon, and I don't know if she can match that, but she seems alright. Next we have Scarlet. Now, the only experience I have with Scarlet personally is Revelation, and that's a very short experience. She was good in that chapter where she is, but that's also the only chapter where she is. That's the only chapter you get her for. And if it was only for that, then I would not rank her very highly at all. I have asked around. I have heard that she's pretty good on Birthright. Not much competition for her. I think she's like the top 5 unit in Birthright. From what I can hear, it's all route and steez maps, and her stats seem pretty good. She joins along with Ryoma with pretty good stats, and as it pre-promotes with, from what I can see, good strength and good defense, and good enough speed to double, from what I can tell. But again, I haven't played Birthright at all, and I don't plan to anytime soon. I just didn't want to miss her on this tier list, so I'm gonna put Scarlet around here somewhere. Like if she's actually like a top 5 unit in Birthright, I would have no trouble putting her here. But in reality, I have no idea if this is correct or not. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I've heard, this should be like roughly the position she should be at. Next is Camilla, and Camilla is really good. I really hate what Camilla did to the franchise, but Camilla is really goddamn good. Camilla is really goddamn good. Haar with tits is what I've heard her being described as. She joins in Conquest. I mean, she's been good for me both in Conquest and Revelation. So there's 2 games where she racks up a lot of credit, and she's very good. She's fast enough to double. Use magic, but you don't really need to use it very much. Generally, she just kills people with axes. I thought she I thought she had doubling issues at first, but then I traded her an Iron Axe and she was just doubling reliably. Maybe a bit of speed with the pair-up can be nice sometimes, but generally her base speed is already pretty good. Her growths are insane. She levels up pretty fast because apparently internally she has kind of a low level before promoting. Really goddamn strong. Her HP, like a lot of Fate's characters, seems kind of low, so if she gets debuffed, there's a good chance she can die. She's also weak to bows, obviously, so like credits to Conquest Design for making characters that are as overpowered as Camilla, but still letting her die if you're careless. So you still have to, like, maps don't become easy just because you have Camilla, but she does get you out of a lot of tight spots. It would be a lot harder if Camilla wasn't around, and she makes a huge difference in the game. That's why I think she belongs in S tier. She really stands out among the Conquest cast, which is not a cast of weak characters. I think she's like the only unit in Conquest that can really compete with Khorne, besides maybe like Jacob before his early availability. But it's not like Camilla joins late. She joins in chapter 10. The game probably starts in like chapter 7. So she, yeah, fantastic unit overall. If it wasn't for the fact that it's Camilla, I would really like her. But it's Camilla, and I really don't like the cynical take that Camilla is on like the player base, basically. But God, she's so good. She's so insanely good. Mommy's right here, and Mommy's right here to stay. Baruga, I think a lot of people like used to like. She joins along with Camilla, so people tend to compare her to Camilla. They're like, yeah, she's not as good as Camilla, but I still think she's like around Jill's level of like competence. Seems to have good stats. I think she has some doubling issues. I noticed them mostly in Revelations. I don't remember how bad they were in Conquest. I started Conquest on hard, turned it down to normal mode, and I remember she had like some issues doubling, but it might have just been me being unlucky. A speed pair up might just fix it enough to the point where she like belongs more closer to here. So this is where I'm gonna put her probably. It's the same process as Camilla when it comes to like mobility in that game. I remember her defense being particularly good. I think she has like a skill called Opportunist that lets her hit for more damage if she's attacking like an archer, or if she's hitting someone else who can't counter. That could be interesting. That could be potentially useful. But I didn't really find it very useful most of the time. A lot of enemies would counter her. A lot of 1-2 range enemies like ninjas. Probably 1 or 2 attack that doesn't proc against. But her stats seem good enough to me. I don't know if I would call them as competent as Cormag's, but hey, I think they're pretty good on their own right. So I'm going to put her around here for now. I think she's pretty good. In Revelation, I would probably rank her a little lower. I'm mostly basing this on Conquest. I didn't actually use her in Rev, so I can't really comment on her. I found her like a little bit underleveled in Revelation and not like as comparatively useful. But she seems okay. It's nice to have extra mobility. It's always nice to have extra mobility. It's nice that in Conquest, anyone can basically rescue anyone can pair up with anyone, and be transported by Baruka. That is something I will give her credit for any day of the week. It can be a little bit less flexible than rescuing. She doesn't have Kanto, but she's still pretty goddamn good. Okay, last on the rankings we have the Wyverns from 3 houses. Now, as I said, in 3 houses, almost anyone should be a Wyvern as if they're a physical unit at all. I would make Caspar a Wyvern. I would make Sylvain a Wyvern. Ferdinand von Eyre should be a Wyvern. Bernadetta should be a Wyvern. All the lords should pretty much be Wyverns. But I picked these because these canonically appear as Wyverns at some part of the game. Generally part 2. Claude's personal class is a Wyvern Master. Cyril, when he appears as an enemy, is a Wyvern. Setheth joins as a Wyvern Rider. So these are the only Wyverns I'm going to put on this tier list. But you can put any 3 houses character here as long as you're turning them into Wyverns. Claude, I think, is one of the best units. I don't know about the franchise. I think he's the weakest of like the main characters, like Boleth and Edelgard and Dimitri, because in part 1 he's not as invincible. He cannot really fight as well at long range because he doesn't have the proficiencies that they have in, say, lances, axes. He has bows instead, which just let him avoid a counterattack, but it also means that until he gets, you know, the counterattack skill or the close counter, yeah, close counter, he's not going to counterattack, and that kind of sucks, but once he gets it, he's still pretty good. A little more fragile than I would say they are. I like the authority boon that he has. I like the fact that he has a high charm stat, so he can use gambits very well. Those are some standout traits for him. I don't know if he belongs in S rank or like the higher regions of A rank. I'm kind of getting the vibe that he belongs here, but I don't mind putting him here for now because I do think he stands out a lot among the cast, especially because in part 2, his personal skill upgrades to where not only he gets more XP, but he also has pass, so he can just bypass everything. And in a game where almost every map is kill boss, having a flyer that can pass through enemies is just super, super strong. The Fill Knot is not his personal weapon. Ashes and Dust is not his personal gambit. Anyone with Sea Authority can use Ashes and Dust, or the Immortal Core is what it's called. And the Fill Knot can be used by any bow user with an E rank in bow, so literally anyone. It's just those with a crest can use it without taking a penalty. But he can use the Fallen Star Combat Art, which is like a really good version of Curved Shot. Lets him avoid a future attack with 100% guarantee, and that allows for some really sneaky plays. Really in character for Claude. Really strong overall. I do think he's probably the weakest of the lords, probably. But overall, I think he's a little less impressive. But still, like, really, really good. The thing is that in 3 houses, you don't really stand out very much. It's hard to stand out because almost anyone can become a Wyvern, so that is one reason I'm considering putting him like down here instead. I do think he stands out less than these for sure, so I'm like going back and forth on it, but I think I'm going to keep him here. I think he's really good, like really, really good, but I can't quite put him in here because he doesn't have any of those pros that these have. Like, these can fly in a game where very few people can fly, so it stands out a lot. But Claude is in a game where anyone can sit on a Wyvern. That's the same reason I'm not going to put Setheth very high. So, yeah, I like Claude as a unit. I picked the Golden Deer first. I have no bias against Claude. But I can't really consciously put him in here, I think. Okay, second to last, but not least, we have Cyril, or Cyril. I don't remember how he pronounces it. I think he works for Lady Rhea. I think he mentioned that a couple times. I think he's... A lot of people don't like Cyril because his aptitude doesn't really work very well in the context of 3 houses. A lot of people think he doesn't auto-level using it, but he does. It's just his personal bases, his class bases kind of suck. He levels up as a commoner if he auto-levels in the church and stuff. That kind of makes him suck. But he's not a bad unit, not at all. He's workable in the context of 3 houses. The first good thing about Cyril is that he has the ability to reclass into Brigand right away. I mean, he needs to certify for it, but he has the extract to certify right away, so he can get Brigand, get Deathblow right away, and that'll get his attack power up pretty far. Then he can also pretty quickly get to learn Point Blank Volley at this, like, Point Blank Volley, excuse me. So, once he gets that, he can just hit people twice with a bow, and I actually found him, like, doing work in Rangar's 0% Growth Throne, which is pretty funny when you think about it. He's pretty easy to recruit early. He joins basically the same time as Hanuman and Manuela. In fact, a little earlier too. I think he's accessible in like chapter 6 already. As long as Baleth is like a high enough level where you build up some support with him. So he's pretty good for that. And with Point Blank Volley, he actually hits pretty hard. So I don't think he's bad at all. It's just, a lot of people will probably overlook him because they like the students more. Cereal's not a very well-liked character, so I think a lot of people don't even give him a chance, but he does have the proficiencies to just become a Wyvern, and as I said, Wyverns are super good. He has a boon in axes, a boon in bows, which are not Wyvern exclusive, but they're pretty nice, and a boon of flying, and that has to do with the fact that he's all Marin, of course, where they all ride Wyvern, so it makes sense for him to like those things. And it's pretty easy to get into Wyvern Rider. My only experience using Cereal myself is in a Blue Lions hard mode New Game Plus run, so not very representative. I find him alright, not super great. Aptitude is not very noticeable in combat, it just gives him good stats when he levels up for a while, but anyone in 3 houses has good stats, I feel like, so I don't know. The fact that you have to put work into him makes him worse than most of these units, I think. I'm probably going to put him like around here somewhere, because the reward is also like a Wyvern that you already have. You already have a ton of Wyverns. And Point Blank Volley, I do like less than, say, Swift Strikes, for example. I don't think he's as good as they are, but he's alright. He works just fine. Maybe like closer to here somewhere. Last one on the list is Seteth, and Seteth is nice. He only joins you in part 2, basically. He's around for a little bit earlier, actually. He's around in chapter 12, but that's the only chapter where you can really use him. So not much time to like give him like training when it comes to like tutoring, but enough to where you can get him to Swift Strikes. He's one of the few units who learn Swift Strikes, along with Ferdinand and Sylvain. And he has Lance proficiency, so he'll learn it pretty quickly. I think he joins with like B Lances. So he needs a couple, like a little bit of ranking, but not too much where it's like impossible to attain. When you do have Swift Strikes, he just kills people, even in Manning, he's super good at it. The only issue I have with Seteth that is the same one that I have with Claude and with Cyril is that the Wyvern in that game doesn't stand out as much as it does in other games. So even though he has the proficiencies to be a Wyvern Rider, he doesn't need to be trained to get, like, the fact that he doesn't need to be trained to get to Wyvern Rider is good, but at the same time he's also not around for like half the game. So because of that, just with mechanics, but it's a little bit lesser, I don't really get to, like, he doesn't have a lot of time to be a Wyvern, which sucks. If Seth was around for longer, I'd give him a higher ranking, but he's not around for very long, relatively to the other units in houses, or even these units here. So as a result, what I'm thinking is like, I think he's like, you think about it, he's like good for about the same amount of time as Heath is good in his respective games. It's just Heath requires some training, so this seems around fair for him. I do think he stands out more than the Minervas. Combat is definitely a bit above them. Sure, he double attack with Swift Strikes effectively, and his stats are ridiculously amazing. I guess the fact that he's good in Flames Paralog is also interesting, but he's not really like one of your units there, so I don't know if that really counts. But either way, this seems about right for him. He can be other classes too, don't get me wrong, but I think Wyvern is by far what he should stay in, unless you like really want to turn him into something else, like make use of grounded battalions or something. I had him as my Dance of the Goddess user once, for example. That was interesting for sure. But yeah, this is about the way it ended up. It's pretty top heavy, pretty expected, isn't it? These were hard to rank when you think about it, because they're all, none of these are bad at fighting, and they all have a place in the game where they're like really good at fighting. So it's just a matter of judging their availability and like how much you have to train them, which is standard. It's like par for the course in tiering Fire Emblem units, but it always ends up looking weird. Cyril in particular like really stands out to me as like a weird guy. As I said, they have like this very distinctive way of designing Wyvern Riders that are based on Minerva, like Jill and Minerva, or Jill and Milady. I just really like. I just can't go over how much, like, even outside of the fact that they fly and they have high movement, and of course I'm mecha and I love that. I just really like Wyvern Riders in general. They always look super cool and badass. But those are my rankings. Let me know if you disagree with any of these, or let me know if you agree with any of these, if that's less work. And I will see you guys next time. Let me know what you want me to tier next. I have a couple of them in mind, but suggestions are always welcome. Thanks for watching. Next time. Bye-bye.